Welcome back to Chat Like a Native.
Great to be here.
So, have you ever, been in an English conversation and felt like you just hit a wall, maybe after a simple yes or no?
Oh, definitely. It happens.
Yeah, well, today we're going to dive deep into how you can break free from those really short replies. We want to help you open up your English a bit more.
Make those chats smoother, more interesting.
Exactly. And really help you connect with people, the way native speakers often do.
And mastering this, it really can change how you communicate in English. It's worth sticking around for.
Totally. So let's talk about that experience first. You ask someone something, maybe you're hoping for a little back and forth, and you just get a one-word answer.
Yeah.
Like yes, full stop.
Right. It just kind of hangs there in the air. And okay, technically it answers the question.
But it doesn't invite you in, does it?
Mm.
Doesn't tell you much about what they're actually thinking or feeling.
Not at all. It can feel like the conversation just dies right there.
Yeah, it really can stop things cold. And, it's not just about keeping the chat going. Sometimes those super short answers can give the wrong impression.
How do you mean?
Well, you might not mean to sound uninterested, but a quick yeah or no can sometimes come across that way.
Ah, right. Like you're brushing them off, even if you're not.
Exactly. Especially when you're maybe trying to build a connection, like at work, or even just, making small talk.
That's a really good point. When you give those minimal responses, you're sort of putting all the pressure back on the other person, aren't you?
Yeah, they have to do all the heavy lifting.
They have to figure out what you really mean or what the next question should be. And well, over time, that can make interactions feel a bit strained.
Plus, you're not really giving anyone a glimpse into your thoughts or your personality either.
Which can lead to misunderstandings about your tone, too.
Okay, so why do we do it? Why do we sometimes fall back on those one-word answers? I think for English learners, there are probably a few common reasons.
Like what?
Well, sometimes you just feel a bit rushed, like you need to process the question and get an answer out fast, and short feels safer.
Safer, yeah. Or maybe there's that worry about making grammar mistakes if you say more.
Definitely. That's a big one. The fear of saying something wrong.
And let's be honest, sometimes the right vocabulary just doesn't pop into your head right at that moment.
Exactly. Your mind just goes blank for a second.
Those are all really understandable reasons. And, we should also acknowledge that sometimes brevity is valued.
True. Like in really formal settings, maybe? Or some cultural contexts might prefer shorter answers.
Right. But for most everyday English chats, especially when you want to connect with someone,
adding a little bit more really helps.
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I think the first step is just recognizing why you might be giving short answers. Is it time pressure? Is it that fear of mistakes?
Knowing your triggers, that's key.
Exactly. That awareness is where you start.
Okay, so we know the problem. We know some reasons why. Let's get practical. What are some simple, really effective ways to expand on those answers?
All right, let's start super simple. Just adding because or and.
Seems almost too easy.
It does, but it's surprisingly powerful. So someone asks, did you enjoy the meal? Instead of just, yes.
You could say yes because the spices were amazing.
Perfect. Or, are you going to the meeting? No, and I actually have a conflict then.
Ah, I see. It just adds that little bit of reason or extra info.
And it naturally nudges the other person to respond, keeps the conversation moving.
It turns that full stop into more of a comma, doesn't it? Like an invitation to keep talking.
Precisely.
Okay, cool. Here's another idea I find really interesting. It comes from improv, like unscripted acting. It's called yes and.
Ah, yes. A fantastic technique. Really good for collaborative conversation.
So how does that work?
Well, the basic idea is you don't just agree, you actively build on what the other person said.
Okay, give me an example.
So if someone says, wow, this coffee is strong, instead of just, yep.
You could say,
yes, and it's exactly what I needed this morning. See? You agree, and you add something new.
I love that. It makes it feel like you're building the conversation together.
Yeah.
Less like question, answer, question, answer.
Exactly. It's much more interactive.
Okay, another really practical one. How about this? Give a clear, short answer first, then add an example or a little story.
Oh, that's a great strategy for clarity. You're direct, but then you illustrate.
Right. So if someone asks, was that workshop useful?
You could say, yes, it was really helpful. Clear answer. For instance, I learned a new way to manage my emails that I've already started using.
Nice. So they get the main point straight away and a concrete reason why. Very effective.
Definitely. And that leads quite nicely into the idea of sharing your feelings or maybe little personal stories.
Ah, yeah, this is where you can really inject your personality, right?
Yeah.
Make it more engaging.
Absolutely. It makes the conversation more memorable and helps build connection.
So instead of just, no, I haven't seen that movie.
You could try something like, no, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it's absolutely hilarious. And actually, I'm hoping to catch it next weekend.
See, that's so much warmer. It tells them more about you, your plans, your interests.
And it opens the door for them to ask more, maybe about the friends you're going with or what other movies you like.
Which brings us perfectly to the next point, asking follow-up questions.
Yeah.
You can't just talk about yourself.
Crucial. It keeps the conversation balanced and shows you're actually interested in the other person, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
So important. How would you do that?
Well, once you've elaborated a bit on your own answer, turn the focus back. If you said, yeah, I loved that new cafe because the cakes were incredible.
Then you could ask,
Have you found any great cafes around here lately? Or what kind of cakes do you usually go for?
right, it shows you value their opinion and experience, too.
Yeah.
Keeps the conversational ball rolling back and forth.
Exactly. It's a two-way street.
Okay, something else. Really listening before you reply. That sounds obvious, but it's a technique in itself, isn't it? Active listening.
It really is, and it's powerful. Sometimes just briefly reflecting back what you heard shows you're paying attention.
And it gives you a second to think, too, maybe.
For sure. So if someone says, I'm feeling so swamped with this project.
Instead of jumping in with advice, you could say.
Something like, wow, so it sounds like you've got a ton on your plate right now.
Ah, okay. That confirms you heard them, you understood the feeling.
Right. And it often encourages them to elaborate even more because they feel heard.
That makes sense. Now, we've talked about adding stuff to your answers, but sometimes it's about how you introduce that extra information smoothly.
Yes. Transitional phrases are your friends here.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Oh, things like, actually, interestingly, well, on the other hand, or by the way. They act like little signposts.
Signaling that more is coming.
Exactly. Like, actually, I tried that recipe last week, and it turned out surprisingly well. Or, interestingly, the article mentions something similar.
It just weaves the extra detail in more naturally.
Makes it flow better.
Okay, this is all great stuff. But I know for many learners, there's still that big hurdle. The fear of making mistakes. It's easier to stay quiet or give short answers than risk saying something imperfectly.
Oh, absolutely. That fear is real.
What's your advice there?
Well, the main thing is, it's okay. Making small mistakes is just a totally normal, even necessary part of learning any language, honestly.
People are usually more understanding than we think.
Way more understanding. Most people will really appreciate the effort you're making to communicate in their language. The willingness to try, even imperfectly, builds connection much better than staying silent.
So don't let perfection be the enemy of good communication.
Exactly. Don't let that fear hold you back from expressing yourself more fully. Maybe practice in situations where you feel less pressure first.
Good idea. Okay, so we've got all these techniques. How can people, actually start practicing this stuff in their daily lives? Make it a habit.
Great question. There are some simple things you can do. One idea is daily journaling.
Journaling. How does that help speaking?
Well, instead of just jotting down keywords like tired or good meeting.
You force yourself to write full sentences.
Yeah, expand it. I felt tired today because my morning meeting ran really late, or the meeting was good and I felt like my presentation went well. It trains your brain to add that extra bit.
I like that. Turning quick thoughts into fuller expressions on paper first. What else?
Role-playing can be surprisingly helpful, even if it feels a bit silly at first.
Like practicing ordering coffee.
Exactly, or asking for directions, making small talk about the weather. Set yourself a rule. Every reply has to be at least, say, 3 sentences long. Use because, use and, use an example.
Practice makes perfect, or at least makes it more comfortable.
It definitely does. And one more, if you're okay with technology.
Recording yourself.
Yep. Record a short conversation, maybe with a language partner, or even just talking to yourself about your day. Then listen back.
And cringe, probably.
Maybe a little. But listen specifically for those one-word answers. When did you use them? And then think, okay, how could I have expanded that using these techniques?
So you actively analyze and plan better alternatives for next time.
Precisely. It really helps you spot your own patterns.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. If there's one main takeaway from our chat today, what is it?
I think it's that you don't need to deliver long, complicated monologues to make your English conversations better.
It's not about talking more necessarily.
Not just more, but more meaningfully. Often, just adding a few extra words that because or and, maybe a quick example, sharing a tiny feeling, asking a simple follow-up question that can make a massive difference.
Really changes the dynamic, makes it more natural, more effective.
Absolutely. So the key things to try are using because and, maybe experimenting with that yes and idea from improv.
Sharing little stories or feelings, asking those follow-up questions.
And remembering active listening, using transitions, and trying not to worry too much about small mistakes.
Right. So here's a challenge for you listening. The next time you have a conversation in English, try to consciously use just one or two of these ideas.
Just pick one. Maybe focus on adding because to your answers.
Yeah. And just notice what happens. Pay attention to how it changes the feel of the interaction, how it helps you connect.
We think you might be surprised at how much closer you'll feel to, well,
Chatting like a native. Thanks for tuning in.